trying to say.
Is it two? I think we'll throw the agendas out, and I think we can start. I'm looking at the huge audience.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit amplified, isn't it, considering we've got a very large meeting room.
Oh, well, that's just part of closing on the meeting rooms down towards the last day.
Okay, just modifying the agenda in real time. There you go, talk about agile slide development.
Yeah.
Okay, there's the slide click if you need it.
Oh, you mean I get to introduce the session?
Oh, go for it.
Okay, do we have? Yes, we do. Use the clicker.
You know what? Our AD hasn't arrived yet either. I think we should coffee break.
Well, yeah, but
Okay.
it's 5 past the time, so I really think.
I got it 11:51.
Oh, well, all right. I've got about 11:53. Well, we'll give it another minute.
Or 11:52.
The hell with it. Okay. Welcome, everybody. This is the super session. Since there's so few people here, it might be kind of nice if we moved a little further towards the front, or am I just too used to dealing with classes of students? Okay. As most of you are probably aware, we've been fairly busy this week, running around trying to get things together.
Is it on?
It is on, yes. So, yes, all right, before we get started, here's the Note Well slide. When I looked at this, I thought, oh, this is the cut-down version, which nobody could agree on last year. But by now, you've seen the Note Well slide several times before. This is the list of our agenda. So we're agenda bashing at this point. And we've got several presentations and a lot of, what we hope, a lot of general discussion. Anybody want to change the agenda at all? No? Good. Right. So, meeting scribes, I think we have Will doing the minutes. Yes, right. And who is being the Jabber scribe?
I'll log into Jabber.
Okay, so Dan is going to be the Jabber scribe. All right, so that's okay. The blue sheets are circulating. Do please sign them. We'll try very hard to lean on our area directors to not be the last session next time around. And I'll apologise now because I have to leave early to get on a plane, but Dan will see the session safely through. So here's the current working group status. We've got 3 drafts being considered. The information model, the data model, and the framework draft, which I think all of these have actually been through one revision getting to this meeting. And we have presentations for those. Then, yes, one of the things which Dan and I, as chairs, had noticed was there's been very little communication on the list. Nothing much happened between meetings. And although that's kind of par for the course, it doesn't look good. So we've spent a lot of time this week trying to persuade people to be a little more proactive. And in particular, well, that basically means what we'd like to see is, normally that would be people reading the drafts and commenting on them. But the other thing which we really want to see at this stage is more people demonstrating that the useful things can actually be done with super. So towards that, I sent out a note a day or two ago saying we really need examples, not just use cases, but actual policy requirements that people would find useful. And the last couple of days, we've actually seen rather a good response to that on the list. In particular, Sue Hares had a project using super in the hackathon over the weekend. So Sue has sent us a few slides at the very last possible moment, unfortunately. So they are on the meeting materials page, but we don't have any easy way to show them. Okay. And yes, the other thing of interest is the MEF working group. Tell me more about the MEF working group.
Yeah, so MEF Open LSO. So MEF is another sort of specification with some standardization activity. They have their open lifecycle orchestrator effort, and we heard through John, actually, it's probably going on to the next slide now. We heard through John that policy is going to be a big sort of component of the lifecycle orchestrator, and the Open LSO effort is the instantiation using various functional components, code contributions, integrating them together, sort of demonstrating reference architecture. And super has been selected as one of the components, one of the capabilities for network policy. Now, this is a fairly immature discussion, as we understand it, at the MEF, but obviously it's a good sign that super is going to have some impact across SDOs at this point. So what is the MEF going to be doing? Well, they're going to be using the data model and at least to a certain degree, the information model, but certainly the data model to implement some policy between the functional components. We don't have a huge amount of information, so apologies if this sounds very high level. John Straussner, unfortunately, can't be with us this week, but he is going to be one of the people that are sort of leading the charge at the MEF. And of course, John is a co-author of two of our documents, the information model and the data model. So Neville mentioned the hackathon. Again, it doesn't look like Sue's made it to the meeting. I know she's got a number of commitments with NomCom. So Georgios, I think you've been designated as Sue's stand-in to present an update from the hackathon and what work Sue's been doing with super and the application to some I2 NSF activity. Is that correct? Great. So in fact, let's go on to that then.
Carry on then.
So we just received the slides about 10 minutes ago. So they've only just been updated. Hopefully they're available for you. Georgios, if you'd like to come up while I just get the slides ready. Can I give you that, Georgios? Thanks. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Before Georgios started, there is a question on, Jabber. Dan asked, is there anybody doing the Jabber subscriber? Have we the range? He asked in the Jabber.
Can anyone log into Jabber? I thought I was logged into Jabber.
Yeah, so my name is George Karagianis, and actually Sue wanted to present these slides, or 2 or 3 slides, and they give actually an overview of what happened after the last IETF meeting, and in particular to how the interface to network security function working group used the information model and the data model that is actually delivered by the SUPA working group.
Yeah. So for some reason the PDF is not going into full screen mode. Let me just close it down and try again.
Okay, but what they have done is that they have used the information model that is defined in SUPA, and they defined their own information model that was used for the. You have it here.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so as I mentioned, these slides were made by Suzanne Harris. Yes, please.
You've got the clicker.
What you can see here is what I've just mentioned previously. So the I2NSF working group used the information model that has been provided by SUPA, the draft IETF SUPA generic policy information model. And then they derived another information model that is in the context of the I2NSF. And it describes actually security capabilities. So how you could, but what kind of security capabilities you could use to enable network security, content security, and also migration attacks descriptions. Then after that, based on this information model, so that was the draft CBAS NES, a data model has been derived, and that is the draft Harris I2NSF capability data model. And then this data model describes actually 2 main interfaces, an interface that is going from the customer side towards the network security controller that they used in I2NSF, and also between the network security functions and the security controller. After doing that, other 2 data models have been derived. As you can see there, the interface data model and the facing interface data model. So they are actually specifically focusing on these 2 different interfaces that I just mentioned previously. And
if I may, unless you tell me that you rather have the questions at the end, for my understanding. So
who are you, Bert?
So I am Bert Weiner. Sorry. So we have the generic policy information model. From that, we have defined a data model, the generic policy data model. Yes. And so I would assume that if there are any data models that derive from that, they would derive from the generic policy data model instead of the information model. So is that missing on this slide, or am I not understanding? Are they, in other words, are they doing stuff that is based on the info model, but that is different than what we do in our generic policy data model?
This is the information that Sue put in the slides. So further details, I don't know. So you can ask Susan later on.
Okay, that would be good. That would be good to know, because my understanding how these things would work, I shouldn't say should work, would work, is that we have an info model. From that we build a data model. And if you want to inherit from our models and you do a data model, you would inherit from our data model. And if you do an info model, you would inherit from our info model, right?
Yeah, but you can also use one way of doing it is also to use an information model and derive another information model. And then from this derived information model, you can then derive a data model. So you can also do it horizontally first, and then
So Joel Halpern from Ericsson, co-author on the data model. I believe that the work they did in I2NSF did not draw on the data model because they started doing their data modeling work before we had our data model. Sue has indicated she would like to use our data model as the basis for future work, but that's going to take some effort since they've gone some way down a path and they now have to go, wait a minute, how do we use these data model components to better represent things? But so it's ongoing work. It's ongoing collaborative work.
Okay, so the reason I worried is because, you know, if whatever data models that I2NSF does come direct from the info model, then we run the risk, right, that they do duplicate definitions from what we do in our data model, or am I mistaken here?
No, but as you remember in the discussions that we had during the charter formation, we said, okay, some activities within IETF have already defined data models, so we have to find also ways on how we could relate the work that is done in SUPA with this existing data model. Okay. So this is what Sud did actually.
I'm not blaming what these guys have done. And you know, if our data model is not ready yet, then this is what they want to do. But I'm trying to express my concern that, you know, if we have a generic information model from which we derive a generic data model, that if someone else derives a data model from our generic information model, there is a big risk, and maybe it's just a matter of checking, you know, that we get duplicate definitions.
Yeah, I think.
So I'm not saying.
No, this is a good comment. So
yeah.
I think we have to take into account. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I'm from Seongyuan University. My name is Jae-hoon Porjung. I'm actually led the hackathon I2NSF. So I can answer. So at the beginning, we tried to follow SUPA genetic policy information model. So the John Strassener, he is the leader of this, the modeling, the I2NSF. He also co-author of I2NSF, the capability information model. So our group tried to make a data model based on John's information model. But now, so SUPA are providing the generic data model. So next step, we try to following the SUPA data model. So next time we try to drive the SUPA's data model. That is our plan. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And here is some more explanation about the way of how they actually derive their data models. So as I already mentioned, the information model was used to derive the I2NSF capability information model, and then the data model has been derived and has been implemented in 3.5 months. So after the last IETF meeting, and used at the hackathon at this IETF, and then it supports filtering, so it's in the area of security. And the bypass, so security filtering from the point of view of firewall, DPI, and forwarding, and the type of filtering that has been used is used for voice over IP, and both are operational problems. And this is what, yeah, this was the last slide. Any other comments?
Actually, there is a, previously there is a comment from the Jabber. It's from Dan Ramosticando. So here, the information about the MEF actually is about MEF, the previous slides. About MEF is very encouraging. I was following the work in MEF before, let me see, before requiring. I was actually probably the first introducing SUPA there. I have no longer visibility as MEF work in progress is accessible only to member companies. It would be good to receive updates as their work develops. This is from Mike.
So do we need to have a liaison?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So maybe the chairs can reach out to these MEF people to see how members of our working group here can have access to their documents and stuff, right?
But what you wish, we will deliver. So at the back of the room is Scott. Scott and I have a meeting immediately after the Super Working Group session at 1 a.m. last night. I had a conference call with Daniel Barlevy and Pascal Menezes, who is the CTO of MEF. So we are actively investigating the use of Super at MEF. Of course, one of the areas that we're desperately trying to get more information on is who's actually using the model, how we can get a feedback loop back into Super. But Scott, you're welcome to.
Yeah, Scott Mansfield, +1. You said my name 3 times and then I showed up. So, you know, thanks.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I think we can now go into the rest of the agenda. So we're going to go through each of the current working group documents, our information model, our data model, and unfortunately, as mentioned, John Strausner can't be with us this week. So Joel, again, is stepping into his place. Thank you very much, Joel.
Okay, thank you. I'm Joel Halpern with Ericsson and a co-author on the information model draft. John has done a much larger portion of the work than I have, but I have been actively involved with this, and I'm happy to be able to present for him due to his being unable to be here. The clicker doesn't clicker.
It's still on. It hasn't been accidentally disabled or turned off.
They've carefully taped over the on-off button.
Looks off. There you go.
There we go. So there was a revision submitted in early July. That one was basically very few changes to reflect ongoing work, but it did have, we have submitted a more recent one, I think. No, that is the last one. We rewrote the introduction. We clarified the relationship between the GPIM and EPRIM, redesigned how versions are represented. One of the things we did is put in fully qualified path names as things. There's various places in the model where it says, go look over here for the information. So one of the ways of saying over here is a path name to a file. We A, clarified that, and B, put in the text some warnings about that only works if you know that the thing sending this and the thing receiving this see the same file system. If they don't use this one because it won't do what you want. So it's there for those cases where it's useful. It's not there. There are many cases it won't apply to, but that's okay. There are lots of things here that many cases won't apply to. Another thing we did was to remove the execution status. And we did clean up the deployment status. This is a cleanup. There were a number of places in the model where it had mixed the notion of actually having a policy engine and its state about doing the policy with the notion of communicating the policy to something and making sure it got it and it was able to parse it and that sort of thing. So deployment, did you send it? Do you want it to be used? Belongs in this model. Execution modeling, were you able to run it against this target, against that target? That's not part of this model because that's not in scope for what SUPA is trying to do. It's an interesting problem. It's great for model-driven engineering, but not what we're trying to solve right now. So we finished cleaning that up. So the GPIM and EPRIM have been stable for 2 years, some fine-tuning on the attributes, but we don't see any reason for this to change any further. The whole model makes a lot of uses of patterns. There are a couple of design patterns we use over and over again. And some of these may be confusing to people, but the nice thing is once you figure it out in one context, you'll see how it works in another one. So we use, for example, a decorator pattern a lot. This lets you create all sorts of things attached to a base item so you can add additional properties and you can easily extend the set of properties without subclassing. It turns out from earlier modeling experience, that if you require that you represent this stuff as subclasses, it looks cleaner to start with. It's a simpler model. And then you add another one and another one. And wait a minute, I need some properties from this one and from that one. So I have to make up a third one that duplicates both of them. And you end up with a mess. This is the kind of reason why we actually do information modeling, why you don't build it up from the bottom. Because if you just start from the bottom, you very easily end up with these things. And then when you add another one, you need yet another completely different one. So we use this decorator pattern in a lot of places in the model. We also use an atomic composite pattern because rather than saying, we know where we need containment and we know how many levels of containment we need, we just say, look, there's a standard pattern you can use to represent containing. And yeah, you might be able to flatten it in some of the cases into one level, but rather than trying to figure out where you can be sure you can flatten it and where you can't, you just use this simple pattern repeatedly for all the things where you need containment, and you get the right result out of it. And then we generalize that. So for example, there's a element which we use to represent what to do if a policy fails, and it's another version of the same containment structure. So it's the same kind of ideas. We do use metadata, which can be attached to any object. That's why if you look at the model, you have the policy object and the metadata. And it's attached at the root so that anything in the system can have metadata, whether that metadata is what date and time it should be enabled, or who should be allowed to modify it, or any of the other things you might want to represent as metadata about the policy. We also have policy targets and policy sources. I think that these work and are really useful. Source is really good for doing authorization modeling. Target is intended to represent this policy applies to this set of things. Many models fold target into the policy definition, into the policy language itself. It seems to be really helpful to factor that out. If you folks decide we shouldn't factor out target, we can always just fold it back in, but we've found it useful so far. The overall structure allows us to model imperative, declarative, and other kind, goal-based or any other kinds of policies, but we're currently, for the IETF work, only modeling imperative policy. That is the direction we've been given from the AD. That is the direction we've been given from the working group. So that's what we're doing. Because in the end, the working group owns this. It's not what John and I want to do. It's what the working group wants. So I don't know. This is unreadable at this resolution, but this is sort of the top, the left half of the model with the metadata attached to the base object, the policy structures, and there's source and target and the policy structure itself. Policy clause, so we separate as part of the model structure between the policy rules and the clauses in the rules so that you can compose rules and you can compose clauses into a rule, and the two are separate kinds of operations. They're not, it turns out that, well, we'd like them to be 100% separate. It turns out the way you compose rules in ECA is different from the way you compose rules in imperative. So we're representing that difference on both sides of the line. I'd love it aesthetically if we could put it on only one side, but so far it seems not to work. It's something I intend to keep my eye on and hope we can get, but I don't know. And this is the other side of the same structure where you go policy clause is under policy component structure, and this is your decorator pattern in order to decorate these clauses. And there's ECA clauses, and we put in provision for a generic clause as well. And so the next 2 pages are just, this is the textual version of the GPIM and the EPIM as an information model. And as an information model, it's got a lot of use of inheritance. We're not, clearly in this, we're not showing the many associations. That's why you use the other structure. You'll see, if you go look at the data model draft, which I'll talk about in a minute, you'll see most of this structure is not reflected in the Yang structure because this is not lexical, it's not textual containment. It is logical inheritance. So there's the question of whether we need something for unknown rules. We do need, no, we need to add examples, and we're going to start working with the one Bert sent, and we're looking for other detailed examples from other people so we can say, Here we are showing how we can solve the problem the working group wants to solve. Because if it can't, we need to fix that. We need to find out early and fix it. And if it can, we need to show you it can, so you can say, yes, I get it. Seems fair to me. So, questions on the IM and the IM status before I go to the DM? Okay, next deck. So the other document is the data model draft, which is Yang. The latest revision is mid-October. It passes all the tests that are available except the buggy tests. It turns out this is one of the first Yang models to make really extensive use of multi-level identities, multi-levels of derivation. It turns out that some of the testing tools we've been using didn't realize you could do that. Okay, it happens. There's nothing wrong. The Yang spec is clear, accurate, and works and does exactly what we need. So the tests will get fixed. At the moment, it covers all of the GPIM. And there are some refinements that we added because we said, well, when we're mapping to Yang, let's make sure we use Yang constructs whenever applicable. So we tried to make this a Yang data model, not just a generic model. We have not done the ePrim part yet. I'll come back to that question. So this is just an overview of how we did this, because taking a UML model and mapping it into Yang was not something that was obvious how to do it. And there probably are other ways one could do it. I'm not saying this is the only way, but this is how we chose to do it. It does mean that when I go to map the ePrim part, it will be mechanistic. There will be a few places where I'll have to make some decisions, and mostly it'll just fall right out from applying these patterns. So what we do is all IM classes become Yang groupings. Whether they're abstract classes or concrete classes, the first thing you do is create a grouping for it. Inheritance is done using classes with identities. So you have a set of identities that parallel the groupings. And the identities are explicitly based. The groupings use the parent, which once it's compiled into Yang is gone. But because we refine the default value of the identity clause in each using, we retain the information about what class we're representing in each grouping. So the inheritance information is there by using that combination. Associations are represented by instance identifiers. We use must clauses that target those identities to say the target of this instance identifier must be at or below this instance identifier. So we're saying what class it has to reference, just the way an association does in a UML model. And when there is an association class, we create a separate abstract class and concrete class for that association class, and then the association pointers, the instance identifiers from the two ends, point to the association class, and the association class points back to the two ends so that we can attach properties to it. Because the reason you have association classes is you often need properties that go with associations. And for every class which is concrete, including association classes, we have a container with a list, with the element of the list using the grouping. And we use the policy ID as the key in the list. So there's a key, there's a list, the content is the class we're using. It works. It does create a forest where most Yang documents prefer a tree, but it's what we can do. I tried figuring out a way to use it with a containment tree, and it just, at least for my aesthetic as a modeler, it just didn't work. I won't claim it doesn't work for everybody or doesn't work for all cases. Particularly for models that are not recursive and that are heavily containment based, it probably does work. But for this model, this is what we ended up doing. So we need to add the ECA components using those same transforms I just discussed. That'll be a straightforward activity. We need to add examples I hope we will put more examples in the IM and then pick a smaller set and show how those are represented in the Yang, showing enough to show the Yang for all of the interesting variations in the use of Yang, but not trying to recapitulate everything. That's the general pattern in, for example, the descriptions. We're not trying to recapitulate everything that the IM draft says, but give you enough information in each description clause that you do understand what you're looking at when you're using the Yang, and so you can actually make use of it. It's not opaque. It's not this arbitrary set of things that might as well be named A, B, C, and D. It does have meaningful names and meaningful descriptions. At the front of section 5, there's a place where it says we will add more description. I'd love to know from the working group how much more description you want there. Because if I look at other Yang drafts, some of them go into elaborate descriptions of all of the structure, and some of them go, you know, here's the Yang, it has description clauses, go read it. And in this particular case, we also have the IM, so tell us how much more you want there. We'll write whatever we need to. I don't care, but at the moment it's a placeholder because I don't know what the working group wants, and I want to write what's useful to other people. Sure.
Bert Wijnen. So if you were, when you say some drafts describe young objects carefully before the Yang, you mean before the Yang module, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. So if you had to do that, that probably would mean that you have to copy a lot of text that's currently in the information model into that, you know, like maybe 15 pages or so in front of the Yang module, right?
That's what I'm afraid of.
And well, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that is necessarily needed if you had a couple of sections that pointed to the particular information model sections or whatever that would be applicable to the Yang module that's following. And then, of course, you're going to do proper descriptions, right?
Right. We've got the description clauses in there, and they're each meaningful descriptions now.
Right. But so you say to get the overview, you have to go to the information model, but that's well, how many pages by now? So if you have a Yang module that actually could do with just referring to a couple of sections or maybe 5 or 6 sections, whatever in the information model, it would be good to have that pointer so that, you know, newcomers don't have to plow through the whole 100+ pages of the information model document.
That's a reasonable compromise, is to put in some pointers that say, we have the following things, the definitions for them are in sections so and so and so and so for full details. A reasonable pointer suggestion.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There is one more question. So there are a lot of, in the information model, there are a lot of enumerations. And actually, John had them originally with all sorts of integer values. And I said, well, for an IM, you don't need the integer values. And we removed them. And now they're just lists of things you have. And so when I mapped that to the Yang, I used an enumeration for each of them. Here are the different kinds of pointers you can have. And then I discovered a problem. And Benoit, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but as far as I can tell, if I build a new submodule that's going to augment this, and I need to add a new value to the enumeration, I can't actually do that because the submodule can't augment an enumeration. There's no way to add an additional value in an enum in Yang. Okay.
So Bert Wijnen speaking again. Is that true, Benoit? Is that a correct statement that he made? I am not 100% sure, because otherwise I'm willing to post this to the Yang doctors mailing list to figure out if, you know, this is indeed true. And if there is a way, I bet you would be interested to know how to do it, right?
If there's a way, I'd love it. But every Yang expert I've talked to who went and looked said, no, it's not there.
Okay.
This wasn't, I couldn't find it. I went and asked several different Yang people and they said,
then let's assume it's
no.
not. Okay.
So what I want to point out is there is another way I can model it. We could take each of these enumerations and make them a base identity that is the name of the kind of enumeration and derive each of the values. That would mean that a new augmentation could then just say, I have a new identity derived from that same base, and I could extend it. So currently, as far as I know with Yang, that's the only way to make these extensible. The question is, I don't want an answer today, but because you need to actually go look, is if folks would look at the enumerations that we have and say, would you prefer these be identities that are extensible, or do you think we don't need extensibility for these?
Hi, Joe. I'm Xu from Kotu. It is true, enumeration is not extensible. If you want to add something, you have to change to a different type. However, there's a separate type called identity. That is equivalent to enum.
I said I can use identities to create this.
Right.
And so what I'm asking is, to the working group, should I change all of my uses of enumeration to be a base identity and a set of derived identities to represent them for extensibility? I just find it counterintuitive that the thing that is clearly an enumeration cannot use enum. But okay, what the heck? I've seen languages with far worse idioms. It's
probably that's the only way to go. So.
Adrian, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, Adrian Farrell. I think this is worth just running past the young doctors, because we had a similar situation with those MIB things that old people may remember, and that was addressed by getting IANA to manage particular enums, so that there was a place where like a fragment that got pulled in from a registry, and that's icky as well. But it should be on the table and sorted out by the people that really do Yang.
Benoit Claes. I would agree with that. I was trying to quickly double check both in the Yang spec, but also in the guidelines for writing Yang model, which is on my plate right now, 67 bis. But the answer should be somewhere in one of those two documents. And I understand you want to use Yang. It's a very simple use case. You need guidelines for that. So it's worth either checking directly, and I'm trying to do that quickly while you were talking, or dropping an email to the Yang doctors, because yes.
Well, I checked with like 3 different Yang experts, and that's why I gave up after the third one said,
No. I mean, they're probably right, but I want to have something in the guidelines to clearly say, in this situation, this is what you do. You do IANA, or you do identities, or whatever.
Yeah, well, I think what we got to use is identities, but I want to know whether the working group wants me to fix those to be extensible. My gut feeling is I do, but you guys own it. And that's the end of this presentation. Are there any further questions? I see another question. Go ahead.
Hello, Adrian from China Telecom. We think the policy model is one interesting topic. We want to use such model to solve our complex problem in our orchestration implementation. But I think we current model is more complex. I worry where it can bring more problem for our orchestration. So and we want to try to the SUPA policy based on your demo solution in next year. We can how much problem can the policy model can solve our problems?
To some degree, doing the examples, which we've committed to doing, and which we've asked the working group for what examples do you want handled, is intended to show you both that it can be done and how to do it for your problems. In the abstract, I would love it to be simpler. The point is, when you try to model the range of kinds of policies, even within ECA, much less trying to allow for a model that will handle declarative, goal-oriented, and other kinds of policies, we have found that we need all of the things here. We did in earlier modeling efforts. I mean, understand that this stuff goes back many years, even in the IETF. And so I'd be very happy if it could be simpler, but I don't know how. And the converse of you want to make it as simple as possible is, but no simpler. And this is what we've ended up with.
There are another concern there are several kind of Yang model in IETF, within IETF, the service model and the next model, device model and the policy model. So we should consider clearly for the relationship between them. If we define so many models, we must to define a mapping between them.
Also, your name for the minute taker?
Hey, Jun Wang from China Telecom.
Okay, thank you.
Benoit Claes. So Joel, I was very surprised whenever you mentioned that enum cannot be augmented. So I checked there and maybe I found what the confusion is. So it says in Yang 101 about updating modules, right? An enumeration type may have new enums added, provided the old enums value do not change.
Well, if you're
now,
updating, let me interrupt you for a moment. If
no,
you're
no,
updating
let
the
me
module,
continue.
you can add, but that's the case I was dealing with was not when we update the base document, but when somebody has an additional derived document, an augmenting document. Absolutely, it is true already.
Thank you for
Yang.
completing my sentences.
Sorry.
For information model, there is one suggestion. You know, I think you should omit the SUPA prefix in every content. You know, it is look very redundant information.
I tried to follow the guidelines. I probably should check again with Benoit's guidelines document. I'm trying to follow the conventions we use for naming. I don't like how long the names get, but I also want to make sure we follow the rules because there are all sorts of issues with conflicting names that cause confusion, even if they're technically allowed. One of the problems I've noticed is it may be perfectly sound to have the same name in two different namespaces, but when I'm reading a module that uses that, it drives me nuts. Even though there's the namespace marker there, I have to go, wait a minute, which one is this? It's just a reader issue. But I'm going to look again at Benoit's naming document, at the overall guidelines, to see what we can do to simplify the naming. I'd love to make them shorter. As a human being, I hate typing those things over and over.
Thank you, Joel. And this is a great example of an issue or a couple of issues that have been identified in the development of the model that could be reflected and discussed on the list. And I know, Joel, we spoke earlier this week about when you started investigating and looking at the potential enum issue. You could have copied it to the list, but you thought you'd save it for the working group, so that's super appreciated. But it's just kind of a friendly reminder at this point that we need to bring more discussion, development onto the list. It's just simply being too quiet between IETFs. We always seem to make great progress during the week here. We've had multiple meetings. I've seen lots of emails flying backwards and forwards. And indeed, on some of these documents, whether it's the information model, data model, and the framework, the different authors are sort of closing off issues. Now, you know, that's great because you're going to update the document and submit it, but please send a summary to the list. You know, let other people know who are at least participating and observing SUPA, you know, the kind of discussion that you had and some of the rationale or the reasoning behind the updates in your documents. And if you post a new document, you can also summarize what these updates are as well. Moving back onto just some quick housekeeping. Who hasn't signed the blue sheet? Thank you, Benoit. And we can now move on to our next speaker, I think, Will. So we can have a quick update on our most recently adopted work item, which is the SUPA framework.
Hello, everyone. This is Will from Huawei. I'm the author of framework draft, and this is our draft, and which was version 0.0, and we are now updating it to 0.1. So next, please. Okay. Oh, thank you. Yeah, here is the history. This draft was adopted in after Berlin IETF meeting, and so we submitted at August this year. And recently, version 0.1 is under updating and reviewing within the, main contributors, and will be submitted soon after we get a consensus. We have done something. Since until now, we have done something here. Is we transferred the 0.0 version into the editable version XML, which is much easier for the future work. And also we addressed most of the comments from the online, on the list and off the list. And I will describe in several slides later. So basically, our draft contains three, main figures describe the first one is the progress of the, information model, data model, and the configuration. And the second one is this figure. This figure is about the position, in the framework way of seeing, where SUPA locates in the architecture of a network. And the third one is about the relationship between policy, service, and the resource. So actually, the main comments we received online and off the list is about the figure number 2 and the number 3. I didn't receive any comments for the number 1. So actually, we based on the. Is there any can point to the? Okay. So based on the comments we received about this figure, we changed a little bit in this place. So here, before we have these blocks, and we only have a C, means communication line between these blocks and the controllers. And here we now change it to directly the generic policy data model and the ECA policy data model can directly talk to, communicate to the controller. So here is the updated. And also, we also changed the sentence explaining the D, line with arrow, because D means derive. And before we write it in our draft as a 2-head arrow, actually it's a fault. It should be only 1-head arrow. And there are some things still under discussion among the authors and the contributors is that whether we should show all the cases in this charter. In the SUPA charter, actually in our SUPA charter, as we can remember correctly, is that we said these SUPA models can be, point to the controller, orchestrator, or even the devices. So in this figure, we only show the, this one to the controller. Actually, it can be an example for the framework. And so this is still the open question. So whether we should have other figures talking about, the framework in other ways. And also another open question is whether we should split the design time and the running time. Actually, in our figure number 1, the progress of generating the information model and data model, we have the, divided it to the designing time and the running time. But in this figure, actually, they all showed in one figure. So there are some comments that we should split it or we should put them together here. And to let you know that we are still updating this figure is not perfect, and your comments are welcome. So we really want the group let us know what do you think on these 2 questions? Actually, I also put these 2 questions on the list. I sent a summary email to the mailing list of what we have done with this draft and what are the open questions. Bert?
Bert Weijner, so when you talk about design time, is that the time when you're actually defining the data models, or is it when you're populating the policy?
The first one.
The first one.
Yeah.
So then I think it might be useful to indeed split that, because when you're designing your data model that derives from the generic policy model, it would be good to understand how that fits into the overall structure of data models and stuff, and it, the runtime, automatically follows from what you define in the data model, right? So then you have at that point less complexity to look at when you try to do the design, I would say. But that's my opinion.
Thank you. So after that, we have this figure about the relationship between this policy, service, and the resource. Actually, we also got some comments on these figures. Before, we have 3 lines, among these 3 boxes. But actually, these 3 lines are different. Actually, the line first and the lines, number 1 and number 2, they are the same as they are both navigable in both directions. But for the number 3, it's only one direction. So we change it into 2 different lines. So number 3, we have an arrow from resource to service. So here we can explain the relationship. And also John pointed out that the relationship between the policy and the service, or the policy and the resources. In last version, we said it should be a 1-to-1 or 1-to-n relationship. It's like that you can use one policy to manage multiple service or multiple resources. Actually, John thinks this should be 0-to-n to 0-to-n. So it's a little bit more academic way of speaking of the same, the same idea. So just to be more, accurate. Here are the main comments that I summarized here, and I also want to give my especially thanks to Jonathan. He gives us a very detailed review and a lot of comments. In both technically and editorial. So actually, we update this draft mainly based on his comments, and there are the 4 comments summarized here, and we almost done everything. And still, we have some open questions for the group, just like what I said in my 3rd slides, that there are still work to do with the framework figure. And yeah, here within a controller, orchestrator, or a network element, here is in what we said in our charter. So I think maybe our figure or our text should be, should reflect this sentence. And so next step, after this, round of review, we will submit a 0.1 version, and still we are looking for more reviews from both operators, vendors, and other people in our group, and so that we can make this draft, accelerate. So that's it. Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay.
Thank you. So sort of one observation that I have, and it kind of echoes discussion that we've had during the week, and certainly kind of what we were talking about at the start of the presentation of the session today, is how we use SUPA, how it can be applied. And we had a late agenda request to talk about applicability of SUPA and the various kind of use cases. But now that we've got sort of good framework document, we're starting to see the information and the data model being used for various experiments. We really need to kind of help participants, especially new participants to SUPA, understand how SUPA can be used, how it can be applied. Yes, the model or the sets of models might look fairly complex at an initial review, but if we can show which of the components are used, how they're packaged together, and sort of your inputs, outputs, events, conditions, to deliver some kind of application or capability through examples, whether those examples are documented in the framework document itself, or discussed on the list, or provided as a set of slides, or pointers to wikis, whether it's the Open LSO wiki or the I2NSF hackathon project. We really need to kind of demonstrate to the wider community what we're doing in SUPA, how we're using it. And of course, I'm sure the info and the data model authors would love to have feedback on how the model was used. What are the issues? Were there gaps? Because this, we have to have this kind of feedback loop of implementation, running code, coming back and helping with the iteration of future versions of these documents. So we did have an additional agenda request. I updated the agenda this morning, so apologies if this is a slight surprise for you. So Georgios, you're going to give us some examples based on the draft Cheng SUPA applicability document. And I've got the clicker.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so as already Dan mentioned, I also agree very much that we need to do as much as possible in order to progress with the work in SUPA. And the way that this could be done is to use examples, and these examples then could be used in order to derive or to use the SUPA data model and show how the SUPA data model is actually applied on specifying the behavior of these examples. So I've used the draft Cheng SUPA applicability draft, and I've extracted the description of these examples. So there are actually 6. So the first one is called switched Ethernet services, and the SUPA policy data models could be used to change the performance and to optimize the performance of the wide area network that you can see there in this figure. And the event condition action policy is used. The event is the link utilization, and condition is the usage in action in this wide area network optimization. And the event condition action policy that could be used is an example. As an example, you can see here. So if an event occurs, for example, that the link load is higher than 90%, under a condition that the acceleration for service is available, then the action that could take place is that data compression, protocol acceleration, other type of enhancements could be done in order to enhance the performance of the wide area network. So this is an example. Of course, this is just an example that is described in a high level, and I think that the next step is to define the details that will be needed in order to use the SUPA data model. And of course, in order to derive that, we have to have a discussion with the operators that have provided these use cases, because all these 6 use cases are coming from operators. So the next step is to have a discussion between the implementers of the data models and the operators that provided these examples. Yes, Bert?
Bertijn, a clarification. So that condition, acceleration for service available, that is a particular operator function or service they provide. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the condition is that this capability should be available.
Right, but it is a capability that a particular operator provides.
Yes.
It's not a generic thing that we talk
no.
about, right? Okay.
Yeah. Then I will go to the second one. So there are 6 such...
Georgios, sorry, can I, just a question on the Ethernet use case. So we've had a recurring theme this week, actually, at a couple of working groups talking about some new modeling work, new sort of layer 2 service model. Yes. Recently started. So if we look at the sort of protagonists of the L2SM work, we've got operators, we've got sort of vendors implementing, operators initially at least leading the work by making sure that we build a model that they want to have and to represent sort of their services. You know, we should be kind of thinking about, you know, the applicability of SUPA with some of this IETF work. So if we can try to reach out and...
Yeah, it's a very good idea, yes. So I think that is also something that we should get in contact with Layer 2 ASM group. Okay, so maybe it should be in the minutes. Then I will continue with the second example, and this is about virtualized private cloud, VPC.
Sorry that I need Bertijn again. Sorry that I need some time to think about. Can you go back to the previous slide again? So Also that action data compression protocol acceleration, that is the compression is an algorithm, is a mechanism that this specific operator uses to accelerate the protocol, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So when I think about policy definitions, then I think about, okay, I can define a policy and I don't care whether it goes to the box of Cisco or Huawei or Ericsson or whoever delivers boxes. So does that sort of mean that that kind of stuff needs to be standardized as well? Or, I mean, this is a nice example in theory, but my thought was, maybe that's wrong, that we do this policy stuff so that we can apply this to different vendors, boxes of different vendors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the conditions and the actions are explicit facilities that are available with one specific operator or with equipment of one specific vendor, then I don't see the generality of this. So then I don't see what we are actually gaining, because if I have in my network both Cisco and Huawei and Ericsson boxes, I would have to define 3 different policies and say, you know, this one applies to the Cisco boxes, this one to Huawei, and so on, right?
Yeah, but I mean, this is a feature, no? I mean, what do you mean with vendor specific? It's a feature, data compression. Data compression could be realized, of course, by different boxes. But
I understand, but
yeah, so,
you know, I try to do a policy definition for my network, right?
Yeah.
And in my network, I have different types of equipment. I would hope that when you do this policy definition, that I don't have to understand all the details of the boxes, that I can set a policy like, when the event occurs that a link is loaded more than 90%, I want to do something. And that the condition and the action that I want to do, I want to specify in a generic way that would apply to boxes of different vendors.
But I think this could be done. I don't understand why this.
Well, that's why I asked. So first I asked whether those 2 functions were specific for that operator or maybe specific for that vendor.
Well, in this example.
Yes, I understand it's an example. And in this case, you answered that, yes, this is an operator or a vendor specific function that exists. And so then the generality, the idea of the policy being something that you specify network wide, I'm losing. So my next question was, so does that mean we need to standardize a number of conditions and actions? That was my question in the end. Sure, that can be done, but if we want it to be network wide and, you know, vendor neutral, then I would think we have to specify those, right?
Yeah, but this is the next step, as I already mentioned. So these are examples, and the way of how these examples will be implemented.
No, I understand that, and I use the example.
And that's,
you know, that triggers in my mind.
That's very good. So
what kind of things are we doing? And
but that is the discussion that we need.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that's why I reason.
Very good. So yeah, we have to have such discussion in order to identify what we need to include in the data model and how we could use the super data model. Then we have the virtualized private cloud example. What this example shows is that tenants are used. So you have a public cloud operator can virtualize the cloud resources into multiple isolated virtual private clouds. So you have, and in this way you can support different tenants. And in this situation, so as an example, what is shown here is a migration of a virtual machine from one tenant to another. And this is done in the case that users are moving from one tenant to another tenant. And then the target of this that is shown in this example is to perform this virtual machine migration when the user location changed and the network log between the data centers. So you have 2 data centers in this case. Is lower than a threshold. So the event condition action policy examples shown here is that the event is that the VPC user's location is changed near to another data center, condition, the network load is lower than a certain threshold. And then the action migrate the virtual machine to the new data center, and then also update the VPNs connecting the user services. And by the way, this is one of the use cases that China Unicom would like to have as to use as a high priority use case. So this one, and I'll show the.
So, Georgios, just on that exact point, we have a comment from Jabba, which I'll just read out. So Ying Chen, thanks for Georgios' presentation on applicability draft. In order to respond to the proposal of Neville before the meeting in the email list, I would like to take the opportunity to propose to start with VPC, this use case, and instant VPN, so use case 5, I guess, which is going to be in a few minutes. In the next step, whose similar implementation can be found in China Unicom, and where SUPA data model and information model can help to enable the scalable, consistent programmatic control.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. So we have now, at least from one operator, a prioritized list. Then I will go to the third use case. This is about traffic manipulation across data centers. So what this figure shows here is that there are multiple disjoint links between data centers, and in order to make full use of the bandwidth that is available on these multiple disjoint links, dynamic traffic steering is in some situations necessary, and then the target of the policy, that the ECA policy that could be used in this case, as an example again, is that when the load on a link is over a threshold, perform traffic steering for the better bandwidth resource usage. And then the event condition action, as example, is that the event is load on a data center link exceeds the threshold. Condition, multiple disjoint links between the data centers are available, and action steer the traffic to link with a low load. Then the fourth use
it's just again, I understand it's just an example. So you say, so it's English text also. Bert Wijner, I forgot to say my name. The action steers some traffic to a link with low load. That's
yes.
I mean, that cannot be the action, right? But I mean, you want to have an action that steers data to some other place, but the action has to be much more specific than this, I guess, right?
I agree. Yes.
Okay.
Joel Halpern, actually, it depends on the policy system you have available. There are going to be policy systems which really can react to an action that says, find a better place to move a useful amount of load. There are going to be other policy systems, and any policy system that's working in ECA, which is going to require far more specific actions. And when we do these examples, one of the things I expect we will have to do is hypothesize more specific subclasses of the action clause to say, here's what an action that realizes this might look like, because we're not ready to standardize the full list of all the actions for all the networks and across all the dimensions. But clearly, to realize that, you have to have those. And who's going to do that work is an open question that has to be addressed. But first, we have to show you, here is where it would go. Here is what an action would look like that would be meaningful in an information model and in a data model to drive this kind of thing. I expect, for example, that some of the actions will be references to other objects in other Yang models that say, change that to use this, and point to the RIB filter model or point to link QoS models and those sorts of things. But that's got to be worked out. The examples aren't expected to tell us how to solve the example. That's our job.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion. I think this is a very good discussion. It will be great if we have it on the mailing list too.
Yeah, will do. Actually, I fully agree with what just Joe said, is that, yeah, we need some kind of pointers to those existing or upcoming service models or resource models. Actually, we are now under discussion, I mean, internal discussion about this. And for example, if Chen, I mean, from China Unicom already pointed the two main use cases they want to see, and we can figure out what are the service or the resource data models related to these two use cases, whether they are already exist in IETF, and we can point to these service models or resource model to change their figures. Just what Joe said.
Yep, thanks. Continuing virtual service provider. So this situation shows the case where virtual network operators are actually do not build networks, including all these components that are needed by themselves, but they are actually rent network from other operators. They have a problem, and the problem is that they are not able to have the control over the tunnels. Can you hear? Oh, okay, good. So the issue that they have is that they are not able to control they don't have control over the tunnels and cannot decide the path, that the traffic needs to follow. And a possible solution is that the virtual network operator could rent routers and place them in operators' data centers, and then configure tunnels between the routers and to perform traffic steering, because then they will be able to have control over the path of where the traffic is going. So then, after initial network configuration is finished, and if a problem is detected, so as you can see here, there are again tunnels that could provide, say, VPNs that could provide connectivity between the data centers and routers. And then if a bottleneck or a performance problem occurs, then they are able to change to steer the traffic in different VPN tunnels by using policy. In this case, using the ECA policy again. So the event, if some quality of service parameters are lower than a certain threshold, so if the performance is degrading somehow, and the condition that the multiple disjoint tunnels are available, as shown in this figure, then the network-wide tunnel optimization can take place, and also traffic steering can take place. So different paths could be used in order to alleviate the performance bottleneck. Then this is the fifth use case, and this is one of the use cases that China Unicom would like to see or like to focus on. And it's about the instant creation of a virtual private network. And in this case, the customer equipment can send authentication request to the provider equipment, and then this request is forwarded to the management system, and then this management system could start instantiate a VPN. So this is done dynamically. And so that the target of using the ECA policy in this case is to configure the VPN for an enterprise customer to connect this enterprise network with the, in this case, virtual private cloud. So the ECA policy, the event service management system receive a CA request for VPN creation. So, and then the condition authentication authorization results are okay. Then the action is to configure the VPN based on the received request, and including all the details that the customer equipment is providing to the management system.
Bert Weiner, sorry that I keep asking questions, but so I see SUPA generic model and SUPA data model. So the generic model in this case, is that the data model or the information model? I think we make a distinction in having an information model and a data model. So when I see these slides, I'd like to understand, whether whatever model we use is an information or a data model, because that is different, right?
Yeah. Well, in the If we want to formalize and describe it more carefully, yes, we'll have to include it. But we have...
No, but the question, so you can answer the question right now. You can update your figure later on. So the super generic model, in this case, is that the data model or is it the information model? That's not clear to me.
Yeah, but I mean, you could have, they are both, of course. So you start with the generic information model, then you go down to the generic data model, and then you go down to the generic ECA.
I understand that that's how you derive to the data models and stuff. You give a usage case description here, and I'd like to understand what these things are, whether it's defined.
Yeah, but the super generic model includes both the generic information model and generic data model.
And so what then is the super data model?
Is the ECA data model.
The super data model is the ECA data model.
Yeah.
And the top level is our generic information model for both.
And data model.
And data model. So I suggest that you make that clear in these pictures, because, you know, I wasn't sure. The way I read it here is that the top one was the information model and the super data model was the super generic information, generic data model. But apparently that's not the case. It's something else, right? So the picture is unclear to me. That's
yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Actually, in our framework draft.
Sorry,
actually,
Will, who are you?
Oh, okay.
No. Who are you, Will?
Oh, okay.
Are you?
I mean, Will from Huawei. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So actually, your questions, this one and the previous one, are related to framework draft. Actually, if you look at the second figure from framework draft, it aligns with this figure actually. So just information model and data model, but actually information model, we have two kinds. Actually, we have generic information model and a generic ECA information model. And for the data model, we have also the both.
So you know, just an observation here again, you know, and I think what's going to be really helpful is showing where you've got these functional components, is showing the, you know, the actual model that you're using or the section of the model and pointing to the document, whether it's an IETF document or some sort of other SDO, where we actually document, you know, these ingredients and the recipe and the the applicability of those components, whether that's in the framework document or I'm thinking concurrently here. It's always useful. But I think we need a wiki. We need to start sort of tracking these, some of these use cases that you've sort of talked about. We need to see which external projects and open source communities are working on which of these use cases, and also if there's IETF hackathons, you know, clearly documenting so we can help participants of Super actually understand, you know, how these are being used and which particular, in this case, use case. But it's not the theoretical that I'm so interested in. You know, it's great to see that we can apply Super to all these different kind of whole spectrum of applications, but actually show me what we're doing. You know, what's been implemented, what code's available. If it's ideally, there's open source implementations that other people can use and help modify.
Yeah, Bert Wijn again, I would very much like to agree with you, because when you look at this data model or this picture, for me, it's unclear whether that means that we can work with just the generic and the EPRIM information and data models that we have defined in this working group, or whether there is an additional data model that derives from those in order to do this. I think the latter, but that's not clear from the picture. And so, you know, whenever we describe use cases, it would be very useful to do that, because that shows that, you know, yes, we have a base set of data models like the PRIM and the EPRIM, but you have to derive from those and define a specific data model for, I think, VPN instance creation. And that should be clear from this thing also. Otherwise, it looks like, hey, you can do this with the two data models that we currently have, and you cannot, I think. Right? I may be wrong.
Actually, I think, and this is guessing more than I've done the analysis, Joel Halpern again, that for this example, what we're going to end up with is that the action is an explicit reference to another already existing service model. There are L3 VPN service models. So all we need to do in our action clause is say, go do a create of that object in that thing with these parameters. And that we should be able to do using the things we build here. Because that's clearly a very common pattern we're going to need to do over and over again. So I think this one will be very straightforward in terms of the IM and DM representation.
Thanks, Joel. Bert Wijnen again. So I agree with that. If it is something that we can point to a data model or whatever in another working group, like the L3SM, as you mentioned, that is fine. But then I would like to see that in these examples,
well,
right?
Because look, he's doing the request. The answer has to show it. Let's differentiate between the request for work and the resolution, Bert. The request doesn't tell you what the answer is. That's our job to do. This is a request for us to address the case. It's a nice, clear case. I understand it. I understand how to write text that says, here's what we want to do in our models to answer the request. Okay, we're not going to get all of the details in the request, or they wouldn't be making the request.
Okay, so you say it's more like a requirement, a request. Okay, fine. I can deal with that.
Thanks. Yeah, that.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Okay.
You can.
Okay, and this is the sixth one, the last one. Traffic optimization, quality of service assurance on the ISP data center. And what this figure here shows, it shows the ISP data center that is connected via an ISP core to an user. And so then what this use case or what this example shows, again, that the data center has multiple external links, and you can use policy to again to alleviate a performance bottleneck. And in this case, when a load on a link is over the threshold, perform traffic steering for a better boundary resource usage. So actually use from the data center, you could actually use a different link in the situation where the traffic is higher than a certain threshold. So the policy says that as event load on a DC link exceeds threshold, or a VIP tenant needs boundary assurance. Condition: the data center has multiple external links. An action steer the traffic to link with a low load in a specific period. So this is just, I mean, is again in a very high abstracted way of the how the action is described. And then target 2 tenants or users may have critical requests on network quality of service. And then this is about reservation for traffic on specific links. So the policy, so there are actually in this example two ways are shown on how the ECA policy could be used. So in the second scenario, the ECA policy is that when the event tenants or users have critical network requests, condition resources along the link are enough for reservation, and then the action is that you perform resource reservation on for a certain traffic on the specific links. And this was the last example.
Hello, Adrian from China Telecom. Here you have sent for deployment of the ECA policy, you must define the event condition and actions. Yeah. But there in network, there are many kind of event and many kind of conditions. The action is also very many. So can SUPA standardize all these primitive element?
Yeah, I think that is the input that we are asking for. So if you think that this
Georgios, could you just keep the microphone in front of you?
If you think that this use case is important for you, and you want to add some information, other type of events or other type of conditions, then please do. So this is, I think it's very good. We are very much in favor of collecting input on these examples.
I just wonder, can and how the SUPA model can cover all kind of the event condition and actions in the networks?
We have to find it out. So if you send your requests, we then have to look into them and then come with an answer.
Okay, thank you.
So I have Will Liu from Huawei. Actually, I have an additional answer for Adrian's question. Actually, we did have an offline discussion yesterday. SUPA here will not, standardize all what you said, all the events and all the actions in the network. Nobody can actually. That is too large. And because we, in our charter and in our framework draft, we did say that we will define a guideline to, guideline from the information model to the data model, so that from SUPA working group we can have several data models about what you said, the main use cases from for the operators. But later, other operators can use this kind of guideline to generate their own data models, so that this can be scalable.
Okay, thank you. More comments, questions? No, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Georgios. And that is our final presentation. So thank you very much for staying until the end of the week. Lots of really good discussion, number of actions, and let's continue this discussion, maintain the momentum, and use the list. Thank you very much. The meeting is officially ended. We had one person arrive. Did you sign the blue sheet?